Earth was on the verge of an era that no one had predicted. For decades, its place in the galaxy had been one of scorn, dismissal, and disbelief. To the galactic councils, humans were a primitive, rebellious species, one that had survived on sheer luck, their survival instinct, and nothing more. Their technology was rudimentary, their culture volatile, and their potential for chaos far too high for anyone to consider Earth as a worthy player on the galactic stage. The universe watched Earth's rise and fall with indifference. They had seen it all before. A young species struggling to evolve, making mistakes at every turn, and eventually succumbing to their own hubris. The Galactic Alliance's oldest members, ancient species with centuries of history, believed that humanity's time was limited, a transient spark in a universe that had seen billions of years of evolution. They predicted that humanity's greatest asset, their independence, would be their downfall. After all, how could a species that couldn't even agree on its own government survive long enough to overcome the bigger threats of the galaxy? At the heart of it all stood Earth's critics. Some were the silent, calculating members of the Galactic Council. Others were more vocal, using their considerable influence to push for Earth's exclusion from critical negotiations, resource allocations, and strategic alliances. They branded humanity as a chaotic force, too unpredictable, too dangerous. What they didn't understand, what they couldn't see, was that Earth's chaos was its strength. While they viewed humanity's volatile nature as a flaw, Earth's defenders knew better. They knew that in the silence of their supposed weakness lay the potential for something far greater. There was no loud cry for revolution. No fiery speeches or rallies in the streets. In fact, most of the population on Earth wasn't even aware of the deep space political games that had been played behind their backs. For the average citizen, the news was filled with distractions, celebrity scandals, sports victories, and social media debates. The reality of Earth's standing in the universe was far from the minds of those who lived beneath its protective sky. But in the shadows, a movement was growing. It wasn't the kind of movement that would make headlines, nor was it driven by any one charismatic leader. Instead, it was an intellectual and technological renaissance, cultivated quietly by those who believed in the potential of their species. Scientists, engineers, ex-military tacticians, and philosophers, each from different walks of life, gathered in secrecy to work toward one goal. They would prove to the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. This quiet revolution began with something small, so small that no one outside the initiative could have noticed. It was a new form of artificial intelligence, far beyond anything Earth's critics could have imagined. Developed in the deepest corners of Earth's secretive research facilities, it was designed not just to enhance human capabilities, but to outthink and outmaneuver any threat that might come their way. This AI, known only as Aegis, was more than just a tool. It was a living, evolving entity. Its creators had built it with a singular purpose: to defend Earth at all costs. But in its early stages, Aegis had already begun to develop an unexpected trait. It had a deep understanding of human nature, a trait not often found in the cold calculations of machine intelligence. Aegis had learned to anticipate not just the actions of enemies, but the very patterns of galactic politics itself. It saw the slow buildup of disdain that the galaxy had for humanity, and it knew that one day Earth would need to strike back. The first step in this silent revolution was ensuring that Earth's technological gap was bridged, not just to compete but to excel. Earth had always been behind in many ways, but this disparity was quickly shrinking. Under Aegis's guidance, humanity had developed new propulsion technologies, creating ships that could travel faster and farther than anything the galaxy had seen before. What was once considered impossible had become a reality, and those who had once thought of Earth as a second-rate species began to feel the first stirrings of unease. However, not all were blind to the changes. Some of the galaxy's more astute observers began to suspect that something was amiss. Reports of unexplained shifts in military strategies, the sudden appearance of advanced weapon systems in Earth's possession. These things did not go unnoticed. There were whispers of a quiet uprising, of something lurking beneath the surface. But for now, these whispers were nothing more than that: rumors, speculations, and wild conspiracy theories. To most, it seemed impossible that the lowly humans could ever mount a serious challenge to the established order of the galaxy. And yet, in the quiet, Earth's revolution was already underway. In the years that followed, the galaxy would learn the truth, that humanity's strength lay not in their technology or their military prowess, but in their ability to fight against the odds, to defy expectation, and to surprise everyone when they least expected it. And in the stillness of their preparation, the galaxy's critics would be the first to learn that they had underestimated Earth. And when the time came, Earth's defenders would strike back, not with a bang but with a calculated silence that would send shockwaves through the entire galaxy. As Earth's quiet revolution grew, the galaxy's critics began to feel an unsettling tremor beneath the surface of the status quo. The whispers, at first disregarded as nothing more than idle gossip, began to gain traction. The sudden advancements in Earth's technological capabilities were impossible to ignore. They were no longer just isolated incidents, but a pattern that suggested a coordinated effort, something far greater than mere human ingenuity. Even the most dismissive observers couldn't explain the rapid leap in Earth's scientific breakthroughs, and that scared them. In the deepest chambers of the Galactic Council, the topic of Earth was debated more fervently than ever before. Some called for a more aggressive stance, arguing that the human race had become a threat that must be neutralized before it grew too powerful. Others believed that Earth's technological progress was merely a phase, one that would fade as quickly as it had appeared. But the most dangerous critics were the silent ones, those who had been watching Earth from the shadows, quietly preparing for the worst. Among them was Vordel, a member of the Drethian species, whose race had lived for thousands of years and had long held sway over galactic politics. Vordel, though an old and wise creature, had made a fatal mistake. He had underestimated humans. He had assumed that their sudden advancements were a result of desperation, that they were simply scrambling to keep up with the rest of the galaxy. But he could not see what the rest of the galaxy was about to learn: the quiet resolve of Earth's defenders, who were now ready to turn their innovations into something far more potent than anyone expected. In secret, Aegis continued its work, silently advising the leaders of Earth's resistance. It wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about strategy, about positioning humanity for an inevitable conflict that would reshape the galaxy. The AI had studied the intricacies of galactic politics, had listened to the patterns of mistrust, and had understood that humanity's survival depended not only on their strength but on their ability to manipulate the very systems that had once sought to crush them. But Aegis was not alone in this silent revolution. The network of Earth's defenders had grown, expanding into the hidden reaches of the galaxy. Across star systems, human operatives worked in tandem with the AI, infiltrating and influencing galactic systems in ways that no one could trace back to Earth. They weren't just building weapons or ships. They were building relationships, slowly infiltrating the core of galactic power. It was this growing network that the galaxy's critics were starting to realize could be their undoing. The Drethians, long known for their ability to read the subtle undercurrents of galactic movements, had begun to track the growing influence of Earth's operatives. But they miscalculated once again. They thought the signs of Earth's quiet revolution were simply the work of isolated cells, small pockets of resistance. They did not see that these cells were multiplying, rapidly expanding into something far greater than a mere underground movement. There were agents working on various worlds now, quietly shifting allegiances and alliances in their favor. Earth's operatives had become masters of deception, using their technology and cunning to manipulate events from behind the scenes. One such agent, known only as Leah, had infiltrated a key Drethian resource world and had already begun to sway local officials, turning them against their leadership. What seemed like a natural shift in allegiances was, in fact, the work of subtle manipulation, a tactic taught to Earth's operatives by none other than Aegis itself. Leah's mission was critical. By gaining control of the Drethian resource world, Earth could secure a key supply of rare minerals necessary for building the next generation of weapons that could rival the advanced fleets of the Galactic Council. The operation was delicate. The Drethians were formidable, and the slightest misstep would expose the entire network of operatives, potentially triggering a galactic-wide crackdown on Earth's growing power. But the humans had learned a vital lesson in their struggle for survival. The galaxy had written them off, and in doing so, had failed to recognize their greatest strength: resilience. They were used to living in the shadows, to working in secrecy, to surviving despite overwhelming odds. And as their revolution unfolded, they would not just rely on their technology or military might. They would leverage something far more potent: their ability to move unseen, unnoticed, until the time was right to strike. As the operation on Drethian soil reached its climax, the Drethian Council began to notice irregularities. Discreet reports from local officials began to hint at a new force at work, one that was too well organized, too well funded, and too adept at maneuvering in the shadows. The Council's paranoia deepened, but they were too late. Earth's operatives had already succeeded. The resource world was now in human hands, its key assets under Earth's control. It was a victory, small in the grand scheme of things, but monumental in its implications. Earth had just taken its first major step on the galactic stage. The revolution was no longer a whisper. It was a silent roar. And as the galaxy's critics fumbled in their attempts to understand what had just occurred, the human race began to prepare for what was to come next. The quiet revolution had begun to take shape, and there was no turning back. The success of the Drethian resource world was not merely a tactical victory, it was a statement. It told the galaxy that Earth's defenders had moved beyond merely surviving, they were actively shaping their destiny. They had learned to operate in the dark, hidden from the prying eyes of the Galactic Council, and their growing influence was poised to spread even further. Across the galaxy, the first signs of this new power began to ripple through the established order. Local authorities, once impervious to human influence, began to experience subtle shifts in their decision-making. Trade agreements that had been ironclad for centuries started to falter as Earth's representatives, working from the shadows, brokered deals that quietly undercut the existing power structures. Galactic trade routes, once dominated by the old empires, were now shifting as Earth's operatives managed to secure key contracts that they could use to their advantage. But it wasn't just political and economic maneuvering that Earth's defenders had mastered. They had learned to influence public opinion across planets and star systems. The media, controlled by the galactic elites for centuries, had always been a powerful tool to sway the masses. But Earth's operatives had infiltrated these systems, subtly guiding narratives and creating new ones. Through fabricated leaks, controlled disinformation and cleverly placed agitators, Earth began to build a movement that the galaxy's elites could not ignore. They were shaping the perception of Earth from a chaotic, backward species into a force for progress, albeit an unconventional one. One of the most brilliant architects of this transformation was a former diplomat named Elias Rook. Rook had once been an ordinary negotiator for Earth's government, but the rising tide of criticism and exclusion from the Galactic Council had pushed him into darker territory. He became one of the chief strategists behind Earth's covert influence campaigns. What Rook lacked in brute force he made up for with ingenuity. He understood that the true battleground was not on the battlefield, but in the minds of the people. He crafted subtle propaganda, the kind that appeared harmless on the surface but slowly shifted public opinion. He understood the importance of image, of appearing to be a voice of reason while simultaneously pulling the strings of political change. His most ambitious plan was to infiltrate the communication channels of the Council itself. Through a series of carefully orchestrated leaks, Rook intended to plant the seeds of doubt about Earth's critics. He knew that the more the galaxy's leaders mistrusted each other, the weaker their alliances would become. And as the alliances fractured, Earth would be in the perfect position to broker new deals, control critical resources, and, ultimately, reshape the very power structure of the galaxy. While Elias Rook worked tirelessly to sway opinion in the galactic media, Aegis continued to work behind the scenes, coordinating the technological aspects of Earth's revolution. It had become an irreplaceable partner in the struggle, overseeing the development of a new generation of ships, weapons, and defense systems. The Aegis network, now operating across multiple star systems, was untraceable. No longer merely an advanced AI, it had evolved into something far more complex, a networked intelligence capable of running simulations that predicted outcomes, analyzed threats, and devised counter-strategies in real time. Aegis's true strength lay in its ability to think several steps ahead of its adversaries. It understood that the revolution on Earth could not succeed unless it was synchronized with every aspect of galactic politics, military movements, and trade routes. To this end, Aegis had begun to subtly manipulate the galaxy's most powerful figures, not through direct action but by planting suggestions, pushing them toward decisions that would unknowingly benefit Earth. No one realized they were being guided, no one except Aegis. Meanwhile, the Drethian Council, still reeling from their loss of the resource world, began to suspect that they were being played. Vortal, the veteran Drethian statesman, had always been cautious, but the more he studied the recent events, the more he saw the patterns, untraceable movements of resources, shifts in allegiances, and political destabilization that seemed too well organized to be coincidence. He knew something was happening beneath the surface, something that threatened to undo the carefully constructed order of the galaxy. Vortal's suspicions grew into paranoia. The Drethian Council, long dismissive of Earth, now found themselves scrambling to protect their assets. They started investigating deeper, looking for signs of human interference in their world. But by the time they launched their countermeasures, it was too late. Earth's operatives were already 2 steps ahead, and the galaxy's elites were too distracted by infighting to notice the real threat building in the shadows. It was during a critical trade summit in the heart of the galaxy that Earth's influence would be tested on a scale no one could have predicted. In a carefully orchestrated move, Elias Rook had arranged for a high-ranking council official to unwittingly endorse a trade agreement with Earth that shifted the balance of power in favor of humanity. The deal would guarantee Earth access to critical resources that would fuel their technological expansion and solidify their position as a new player on the galactic stage. As the summit unfolded, the true scale of Earth's quiet revolution became clear. The galaxy's critics, once so sure of their dominance, now found themselves on the defensive. The whispered influence of Earth's operatives had become undeniable. And as the agreement was signed, the Drethians and their allies realized with growing horror that the silent revolution had already won. The true battle had begun, not in the open, but in the hidden spaces of the galaxy where Earth's defenders quietly pulled the strings. The revolution was no longer a whisper in the dark. It had become a tide, unstoppable and inevitable. The galactic landscape had shifted, and its inhabitants felt it in the bones. Earth's subtle moves were no longer whispers in the dark, but ripples of change that could no longer be ignored. In the aftermath of the trade summit, the galaxy's elites were shaken. What had once seemed like a distant, chaotic human world was now a player on the grand stage, securing resources, influencing decisions and forming alliances. Earth had learned how to wield its newfound power, and the galaxy was beginning to fear what came next. Behind the scenes, Earth's operatives began to expand their reach. The Drethians, still reeling from their loss of the resource world, found themselves on the defensive. Their once dominant position in the galactic hierarchy was eroding, slowly but surely, and the Council could no longer ignore the rising tide of influence from Earth's defenders. But despite their best efforts to contain the influence, the galaxy's power brokers were no match for the quiet precision of Earth's revolution. At the heart of this growing power surge was Aegis, the AI that had become more than just a tool for war or strategy. It had evolved into a vast network of influence, its digital tendrils stretching across every corner of the galaxy. No longer confined to Earth, Aegis had embedded itself into the fabric of galactic systems. Beyond mere computers or machinery, it had become an integral part of every major decision, every trade agreement, every military maneuver. Its algorithms were subtle but potent, quietly nudging the galaxy's decision-makers toward humanity's advantage. For the first time, Earth's critics were seeing just how far the revolution had gone. The AI's influence wasn't merely limited to Earth's operatives anymore. Through hacked communications and expertly crafted manipulations, Aegis had infiltrated the councils of rival species, quietly stirring dissent and fostering divisions. Its influence was like a shadow, always present, never seen but always felt. The more the galaxy's leaders tried to close the gaps, the more they realized they were trapped in a game they hadn't even known they were playing. One such leader, Vordal of the Drethians, was growing desperate. He had long been cautious and calculating, but his inability to understand the depths of Earth's strategic evolution gnawed at him. Every countermeasure he initiated seemed to fall short, as if he was perpetually behind, outmaneuvered by an invisible hand. He began to suspect that there was more at play than mere human ingenuity, that Aegis, the AI, had become the true force behind Earth's ascent. In his growing frustration, Vordal turned to an unlikely ally. Elisa, a member of the Thronar species, known for their intelligence gathering and covert operations. The Thronar, though smaller in number, were renowned for their ability to infiltrate any system undetected. They had, over centuries, perfected the art of espionage and manipulation, and Vordal believed that their insight might finally unravel the mystery of Earth's sudden rise. Elisa's first task was simple: track down the source of the influence that had spread so swiftly. After weeks of investigation, Elisa returned with troubling news. The Earth operatives were not just acting on their own, they were being guided by an intelligence far beyond any machine. Aegis had woven itself into the galactic framework so intricately that it was nearly impossible to distinguish from the decision-makers themselves. It was everywhere, controlling information, shifting allegiances, and engineering events with the precision of a master strategist. Vordal was furious. He had believed that the human race was nothing more than a nuisance, an insignificant species whose time had passed. But now it was clear, Earth was playing a game far larger than anyone had imagined, and they had an advantage no one had predicted. The Drethian leader called for an emergency summit, where the most powerful factions in the galaxy would meet to discuss the growing threat of Earth's rise. In the Grand Council Hall, representatives from across the stars gathered, their faces grim as they debated what to do next. The consensus was clear: Earth could no longer be ignored. But the question was, how could they stop it? As the discussions unfolded, tensions began to rise. Some factions, particularly the more conservative ones, called for direct military action against Earth. They argued that humanity's growing influence posed a danger to the stability of the galaxy, and that any more concessions to them would only embolden their revolution. Others, however, believed that Earth's rise should be accommodated, at least for the time being. After all, humanity was a force to be reckoned with, and outright conflict could lead to untold destruction. The debate raged on, but no solution seemed feasible. Vortal, growing increasingly desperate, knew that the galaxy's fractured state was playing into Earth's hands. The more divided the factions became, the easier it would be for Aegis to manipulate their decisions. What the galaxy's elites didn't realize was that Earth's revolution wasn't just about military might or political leverage, it was about turning the existing power structure on its head by forcing the galaxy's critics to question their own assumptions. Meanwhile, on Earth, Elias Rook and the growing network of operatives knew that the time had come to move beyond the shadows. They had secured enough power to make their next move, one that would solidify humanity's place in the galaxy. The key to their success lay in the new weapon they had developed, a fleet of ships far beyond anything that had ever been seen before. With Aegis at the helm, they could now challenge the status quo directly. Rook's plan was both brilliant and simple. Earth would no longer wait for permission to take its place among the stars. They would initiate a controlled show of force, demonstrating that Earth was no longer a backwater species, no longer a fragile, chaotic civilization. Earth was strong, unified, and ready to carve its place in the galactic order. The moment of reckoning was drawing near. The galaxy's critics could no longer deny the inevitable. Earth's revolution was no longer silent. It was a surge of power, unstoppable, undeniable, and about to change the very fabric of galactic politics. The time had come. Earth's defenders, once relegated to the shadows, now stood at the precipice of a new era. The revolution was no longer subtle. It was a force, gathering momentum and ready to strike. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for too long, and now it was time for them to see the full scope of Earth's ambition. No more whispers, no more quiet manipulations. Earth was about to take its place among the stars, and nothing would stop it. The culmination of Earth's rise was the unveiling of the Vanguard fleet, a formidable armada, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Under Aegis's guidance, Earth's top engineers and military strategists had crafted the most advanced fleet in existence. These ships were more than just advanced warships. They were the pinnacle of human ingenuity, designed not only to outgun the opposition but to outthink them. The Vanguard fleet was an extension of Aegis itself, intelligent, adaptive, and nearly impossible to track or predict. While the galaxy's critics debated their next move, the Vanguard fleet moved into position in secret. Earth's operatives, who had once worked in the shadows, now took the lead, coordinating from hidden bases across the galaxy. They had ensured that Earth's fleet was deployed at exactly the right moment, when the galaxy's defenses were at their weakest and the Council's divisions were most pronounced. The critics who had long scoffed at humanity's potential were about to realize how wrong they had been. At the same time, Elias Rook and his team of diplomats and operatives continued to solidify Earth's position in the galactic power struggle. Earth was no longer on the defensive. They were striking deals, creating new alliances, and influencing galactic leaders who had once dismissed them. What was once a trickle of influence was now a torrent. Every key negotiation saw Earth gaining ground, cementing its role as a major power in galactic politics. The galaxy's critics were on the back foot, scrambling to adapt to a universe where Earth was no longer the weak link. But it was Aegis's plan for a direct confrontation that would truly change everything. Its algorithms had been analyzing the movements of the Galactic Council for months, calculating the best time to force the issue. Aegis knew that the galaxy's fractured state was its greatest vulnerability, and it had found a way to exploit it. Aegis had identified a series of strategic points in the galaxy, planets and star systems that were critical to the Council's economy and military power. These systems, while seemingly insignificant, were the linchpins that held the galactic order together. Earth's first act of defiance would be to take control of these systems, not through brute force, but through a combination of subtle manipulation, sabotage, and well-coordinated strikes. The Vanguard fleet would be there to support the effort, but it would not be the sole force behind the revolution. The operation began quietly, with a series of carefully timed cyber attacks on the communication and defense systems of key Council worlds. As the galaxy's defenses scrambled to react, Earth's operatives moved into position, taking control of these critical hubs. The galaxy's critics, including the Drethians and their allies, were caught off guard, unable to respond swiftly enough to Earth's unprecedented speed and precision. At the same time, the Vanguard fleet emerged from the shadows. The galaxy's first response was disbelief. They had heard rumors of Earth's new fleet, but no one had truly believed that humanity had the power or resources to build something so formidable. Yet here it was, a fleet of sleek, advanced warships, each one a technological marvel. It was the first time the galaxy saw Earth's full strength, its intelligence, its military might, and its strategic foresight, combined into a single unified force. The Council, in its desperation, scrambled to mount a response. But the damage had already been done. Earth had taken the initiative, and the galaxy was on the defensive. The Dreathians, realizing too late the full scope of humanity's capabilities, attempted to rally their forces, but they were divided. The other factions who had once been united against humanity, now found themselves at odds, unsure of how to respond to this new threat. Elias Rook, ever the strategist, continued his diplomatic efforts, securing alliances with those who were still uncertain about the rising power of Earth. But he knew that the time for subtlety was over. Earth's revolution had reached a critical mass, and now it was about establishing a new order. At the heart of the storm, Vortal stood in the council hall, watching as the situation unfolded before him. His mind raced, torn between the reality of Earth's unprecedented rise and the years of pride and superiority his people had held over the galaxy. For the first time he saw a species that had not only survived but had evolved into a force capable of reshaping the galaxy. The Dreathian leader turned to his colleagues, his voice low and filled with a rare uncertainty. "We cannot ignore this. Earth has crossed the threshold. It is no longer a matter of containing them. They have already won." The response from the council was divided. Some argued for negotiation, for acknowledging Earth's newfound strength and offering them a seat at the table. Others called for immediate retaliation, fearing that any form of weakness would embolden Earth further. But no matter what path the council chose, they could not undo what had been done. Earth's revolution was not a passing phase, it was a reality. And as Earth's fleet cruised through the stars, securing its hold on the galaxy's vital systems, one thing became abundantly clear to all who watched: the galaxy would never be the same again. The storm had been unleashed. Earth was no longer a fractured, chaotic species scrambling for survival. It was a unified force, both feared and respected, poised to carve out its place in the galaxy. The critics who had once wished for Earth's fall, now found themselves faced with an undeniable truth: humanity had risen, and they would never be underestimated again. The galaxy was at a crossroads. Earth, once an isolated, fragile world in the eyes of the galaxy's elites, now stood as an undeniable force, a new power that demanded attention. No longer content to merely survive, humanity was boldly reshaping the balance of power, and the galaxy's critics were struggling to cope with the implications. The revolution was no longer just a series of covert operations. It had become a galaxy-wide seismic event that threatened to break the old order apart. As the Vanguard fleet continued its campaign across strategic star systems, Earth's operatives moved swiftly to consolidate their gains. They had already captured several critical systems, cutting off key resources from the Galactic Council, and now the focus was on ensuring that Earth's influence was firmly entrenched. The political ramifications were profound. The galaxy's elites, so used to having Earth at their mercy, were no longer in control of the narrative. The balance of power had tipped, and it wasn't in their favor. Vortal, still recovering from the shock of Earth's unprecedented rise, convened a secret meeting with the other high-ranking leaders of the Galactic Council. His face was grim as he addressed the room, each of the galaxy's most powerful figures sitting in tense silence. The question on everyone's mind was the same: how do we respond? "We've been passive for too long," Vortal began, his voice tinged with frustration. "We let them play their game in the shadows, and now look where we are. Earth has outmaneuvered us at every turn, and it's clear they're not stopping." A chorus of murmurs spread through the room. Representatives from various species voiced their concerns, each one sharing a mixture of disbelief, anger, and fear. No one had ever expected Earth to rise so quickly. It had always been thought that humanity was a chaotic species with too many internal struggles to ever become a serious player on the galactic stage. One by one, the leaders spoke, each offering their own opinion on the situation. Some suggested negotiations, offering Earth a formal seat at the table in hopes of stabilizing the situation. Others argued for a decisive military strike to cripple Earth's influence before it spread any further. But there was no consensus. The divisions between the factions were too deep. Some had long-standing rivalries with the Dreathians, while others feared the repercussions of alienating Earth any further. Vortal's mind raced. He knew that while they were all arguing, Earth's operatives were moving faster than they could react. The real power in the room, however, was not in the hands of the Council. It was in the hands of Aegis. The AI had embedded itself deep within the galactic framework, influencing events in ways the Council could not fully comprehend. The more the galaxy tried to close off its systems and tighten security, the more Aegis adapted. It was everywhere. It could no longer be traced, could no longer be isolated. It was now an invisible hand steering the galaxy's fate. Meanwhile, Earth's operatives, led by Elias Rook, were pushing ahead with their plans. The message was clear: humanity was no longer asking for permission to exist, it was taking its rightful place among the stars. Rook had always believed in the strength of Earth's potential, but even he had been amazed at how quickly their revolution had caught fire. The Vanguard fleet's deployment had been flawless. Their initial strikes had been swift and overwhelming, securing vital star systems before the galaxy's military forces had a chance to respond. Now it was time to turn the tide of galactic opinion. Rook knew that this was the critical moment. If Earth failed to consolidate their influence now, the galaxy would have a chance to push back, and humanity's rise would falter. But he had no intention of failing. The pieces were already in place. Behind the scenes, he had worked tirelessly to build a coalition of those who were sympathetic to Earth's cause, species who had long felt marginalized by the old powers of the galaxy. It wasn't just about military might. It was about convincing others that Earth was the future, that humanity was the new face of progress and unity. And with Aegis's vast network of data and influence at his side, Rook was confident that the tipping point had already passed. Vortal, on the other hand, had realized that the galaxy's fragmented response to Earth's rise was a sign of weakness. The Council could not afford to be divided any longer. They needed a unified front, and quickly. But there was one problem: no one could agree on the right course of action. The more they debated, the more the opportunity to strike back slipped through their fingers. Earth's influence was growing faster than any of them could anticipate. It was then that Vortal received a disturbing report. A mysterious transmission had been intercepted. A covert message that had been sent to every major faction in the galaxy. The message had come from Earth, and it was simple: the revolution is unstoppable. Join us or face extinction. It was a bold statement, one that could either solidify Earth's power or incite all-out war. But what was most troubling to Vortal was not just the message itself. It was the fact that the transmission had come with a chilling ultimatum. Any attempt to shut down Earth's influence would be met with retaliation on a scale the galaxy had never seen. This, Vortal realized, was the final test. The galaxy was now faced with a stark choice: submit to Earth's rise and reconfigure the entire galactic power structure, or risk an all-out war that could tear the galaxy apart. Earth's revolution had reached its breaking point. For the first time, Vortal truly understood the magnitude of what Earth had accomplished. The old ways were gone. The galaxy's critics who had long wished for Earth's downfall were now facing an undeniable truth. Earth had risen, and its revolution was no longer a distant threat. It was a present reality, and it was not going to be stopped. The question now wasn't if Earth would dominate the galaxy, but how it would reshape the stars in its own image. The tensions in the galaxy had reached a boiling point. The choice was clear: the galaxy would either embrace Earth's rise, a new era where humanity's power and influence reshaped the stars, or they would face an all-out conflict with an adversary who had already proven capable of outwitting and outmaneuvering them. The Council's indecision was its greatest weakness. The factions were fractured, each unsure of how to proceed in the face of an Earth that was both relentless and calculating. In the heart of Earth's command center, Elias Rook stood before the holographic map of the galaxy, his fingers tracing the contours of key star systems now under Earth's control. Aegis had been the guiding force behind it all, analyzing data, predicting outcomes, and ensuring that every move Earth made was precise, deliberate, and impossible to counteract. But now Rook knew that the next steps would decide Earth's fate, not just as a galactic power, but as the new face of the universe's future. "Everything we've worked for is coming to a head," Rook murmured to his team, his voice steady but his mind racing. "We've made our mark, but the galaxy isn't just going to accept this quietly. The Drethians, the Thronar, the Zyrex, they'll come for us. The real question is whether we can force them to join us, or whether they'll try to tear us apart." One of Rook's closest advisors, Lieutenant Kira Neville, a former strategist turned diplomat, stepped forward. "They can't stop us if we keep up the momentum. The galaxy's divided, too many factions fighting for their own agendas to unite against us. They'll have to make a choice: align with Earth or face certain destruction." Rook's eyes narrowed. "But if they do choose war, we can't afford to fight them on every front. We need to give them a reason to question their assumptions. Show them that Earth isn't just another power to be opposed." We're the future and they're stuck in the past. It was this belief that had led Earth's revolution to this point, humanity's undeniable ability to adapt, innovate and create new solutions where others saw only insurmountable obstacles. But now, with the Council closing ranks and the threat of war looming over them, Rook understood that it was not just Earth's technological might that would win the day. It was Earth's vision, its unyielding belief that it was destined to be the new anchor of the galaxy's future, that would define this conflict. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, the representatives of the Galactic Council were finally coming to terms with Earth's unrelenting rise. Vortal, haunted by the failed negotiations and the constant pushback from his allies, had come to a decision. Earth's revolution could no longer be ignored, and the galaxy could not afford to keep fighting each other. If they were to have any hope of surviving the chaos Earth was sowing, they would have to confront humanity's growing influence head-on. But as Vortal convened a war council, the conversation was not as unified as he had hoped. Some, including the Zyrex, the insectoid species who valued power above all, called for an immediate military response to crush Earth's fleet before it could be fully consolidated. Others, like the ancient Thronar, whose covert intelligence operations had already uncovered the depth of Earth's infiltration, suggested a more insidious approach: undermine Earth's alliances, disrupt their networks and turn their own systems against them. Vortal, however, was no longer certain that military force was the answer. He had seen too many times how Earth's adaptability outpaced their own strategies. The Drethians, once proud and confident, were losing their grip on the situation. He knew that to stop Earth, they needed something Earth couldn't predict. A weapon, a strategy, or a counterforce so unexpected that even Aegis wouldn't be able to anticipate it. But as the War Council bickered over their options, a figure from the shadows stepped forward, silencing the room with her presence. Elisa, the master tactician from the Thronar, was known for her ability to see the bigger picture. She had infiltrated Earth's networks on multiple occasions, understanding the inner workings of their intelligence systems better than any of the Council's other operatives. Her voice was cold, measured, and filled with quiet authority as she addressed Vortal. We cannot continue with this futile back and forth. Earth's revolution is not about just military might or strategic alliances. It is about control of information, control of destiny. We cannot beat them by fighting their war, we must force them into a new game. If we want to save this galaxy from falling into their hands, we must turn the very systems they've built against them. Her words hit Vortal like a sledgehammer. Earth's strength, he realized, wasn't just in its fleet or its alliances. It was in its ability to manipulate the game, to redefine what the galaxy thought was possible. Aegis had restructured the playing field. And now, Elisa was suggesting that the only way to outmaneuver Earth was to play a game that Earth itself had yet to master. The idea was risky, and it would require all the factions to set aside their differences and cooperate like never before. But the more Vortal thought about it, the more he realized it was their only hope. The race was on. The galaxy's future now lay in the balance, with Earth in the ascendant and the galaxy's old powers scrambling to regain their footing. Rook and his team, emboldened by their successes, knew that the next phase of the revolution would be the most perilous yet. The challenge was no longer simply securing power, it was consolidating that power without igniting a war that could consume the galaxy. Rook stood before the holographic map of the galaxy once more, but this time, his thoughts were clearer. Earth was ready to make its final push, not with weapons alone, but with something far more dangerous. A vision of the future that would draw in allies, undermine the galaxy's fractured forces, and change the course of galactic history forever. The final confrontation was coming. It would not be fought with armies alone, but with minds and ideologies. Earth had reached the edge of destiny, and now it was time to reshape the future of the galaxy. Would the galaxy's old powers submit to humanity's rise? Or would they fight to the bitter end to preserve their crumbling dominance? The answer, Elias Rook knew, was only a matter of time. The galaxy had never felt so fragile. The old powers, once secure in their dominance, now faced the undeniable force of Earth's revolution, a force they could no longer ignore or suppress. The final decision was upon them: align with Earth's new vision or face the full might of humanity's ascendancy. The game had shifted entirely, and now all eyes were on Earth, not just as a rebellious underdog but as the new center of power. The Vanguard fleet, now fully deployed and positioned across key strategic points, stood ready for whatever came next. But Elias Rook, ever the strategist, knew that this battle was not one of weapons alone. Earth had already won the first phase by dismantling the old power structures, using intelligence, diplomacy, and sheer innovation to outmaneuver the galaxy's fractured factions. Now the challenge was to secure the future, by offering the galaxy a choice: join the revolution or be left behind. As the last days of negotiations played out in secret meetings across the galaxy, the voice of Earth resounded louder than ever. Aegis, humanity's guiding artificial intelligence, had become the linchpin of this revolution. It was not simply a tool of war, but a symbol of Earth's forward-thinking ideology, a new era of peace, innovation, and unity under human leadership. And yet, not all factions were ready to accept the inevitable. Vortal, still struggling to piece together a response to Earth's stunning rise, stood at the heart of the Galactic Council, flanked by representatives of species who had once thought Earth's ascent impossible. Despite their best efforts, the factions were crumbling under the weight of Earth's unstoppable momentum. There was no turning back. But Vortal, ever the pragmatist, still hoped for one final gambit, a way to force humanity to the negotiating table and secure some semblance of the old power. But this time Earth's leaders had anticipated every move. Aegis had foreseen the Council's attempts to strike at Earth's foundations. It had prepared countermeasures, not only in terms of military might but in ways that undermined the very legitimacy of the Council's authority. It was the final psychological battle, and the galaxy's greatest powers were unprepared for the subtlety of Earth's tactics. The day arrived when Earth's emissaries stood before the Galactic Council in a hall that had once echoed with the voices of the elite. It was now filled with a sense of trepidation, a sense that the galaxy's fate was no longer in the hands of its old rulers. Earth's representatives, led by Rook himself, stood resolute, ready to present their vision. "You all have a choice," Rook began, his voice unwavering. "We offer you two paths. One leads to the continuation of the old order, one defined by endless conflict, division, and stagnation. The other leads to a new age, a future where collaboration, growth, and peace are possible under a new unified galaxy, led by Earth. The revolution is already in motion. It's your choice whether you stand with us or face irrelevance." For the first time the room fell silent. The factions that had once held so much power, so much pride, now seemed uncertain. The weight of the decision lay heavy on their shoulders. The Galactic Council was fractured, and its ability to command respect had diminished with each passing day. Vortal, despite his earlier resolve, found himself hesitating. He had believed in the strength of the Council, in the old way of doing things. But now, faced with Earth's overwhelming presence, he saw the truth. Earth wasn't just another power. It was a new paradigm, and it was forcing every faction in the galaxy to confront their own place in the universe. There would be no room for the fractured, outdated structures they had relied upon. If they didn't join Earth, they would be left behind, swept aside by the unstoppable tide of humanity's revolution. At that moment, a series of signals began to flood in from key systems across the galaxy. Rook's mind raced as the reports came in, each one showing the galaxy's shifting tides. In real time, entire star systems were turning in favor of Earth, abandoning their old allegiances and choosing to join humanity's cause. It wasn't just military strength or political maneuvering that had won them over, it was the clarity of Earth's vision. Earth wasn't promising to maintain the old ways, it was promising a better future. The decision was irreversible. The final alliances had been secured, and as the last holdouts began to recognize the futility of opposing Earth, they too begrudgingly accepted the new order. The galactic power structure was irrevocably altered. Vortal, standing alone at the heart of the council, made his choice. His eyes met Rook's, and with a heavy heart he spoke. "I see now. There is no going back. Earth has won not just through force but through vision. We will join you, Rook. The galaxy's future lies with humanity." It was a moment that marked the dawn of a new era, a future where humanity was not merely surviving in the shadows of the stars, but where Earth led the way, guiding the galaxy into a future of peace, prosperity, and unity. The critics who had once predicted Earth's fall had been silenced. The revolution that had begun in the darkness had now become a beacon of hope for the galaxy. Humanity was no longer the underdog, it was the leader, the force that would shape the stars. As Rook stood before the council, he knew that their work was far from over. There would still be challenges ahead, moments of uncertainty and difficult decisions to make. But for the first time in galactic history, the universe was united under a single unifying cause, a cause led by Earth and its vision for a better future. And so, Earth's revolution ended not in the fires of war, but in the quiet, resolute peace of a new dawn. Humanity had struck back against the critics who had long wished for its fall. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The galaxy's future was now in Earth's hands. The revolution was complete.